Welcome to another edition of the Sooner Pocket Podcast. Sam Knight here with my brother Chris. Make sure ahead of the Tennessee game today to check out www.soonerpocket.com. Lots of great content there. Pre-game looks at things, post-game recaps, all the works. Going to be a good time today against Tennessee. Had some interesting football last night. Nebraska snatching defeat from the jaws of victory once again, finding a way to lose against Illinois. It's just kind of their wheelhouse now. I know you and I, Chris, we were talking off camera a couple days ago about Nebraska potentially in the next year to 2 years being a contender for the Big Ten. Does what happened last night change that at all, with Illinois looking like a stronger opponent being ranked now? How do you feel any differently?
I don't. Nebraska, that loss honestly just made me mad last night. I have really no rooting interest there, but something that's just annoying to watch is sloppy football. I especially like if everyone knows that you were a good team, playing like you just don't care, it's annoying to watch. And in the second half, Nebraska's defense went from putting all types of pressure on Illinois to just hoping they could slow them down and that their offense would bail them out. And they gave their offense an opportunity or two, but they couldn't capitalize on any of them because whether it's the overthrow from Dylan Raiola or just the inability to run the ball, those sacks both in the fourth quarter and in overtime, they couldn't figure out how to play. And but I still believe that they're a significantly better team than they were last year. Uh, Last year, this game would have been a blowout. Uh, and so, yeah, I think they'll be fine in the next year. So I do think any potential playoff hopes were probably dashed tonight. But in the next year or so, especially with Dylan Raiola back there, he'll get it figured out. He's still a true freshman.
Lots of good freshman quarterback, for freshman quarterbacks around the country right now. You talk about sloppy play and how you hate it. No one hates sloppy play more than Brent Venables. And that's what leads me into talking about my offensive player of the game from the Tulane game this past week, Javante Barnes. 14 rushes, a little over 50 yards. He was running just under 4 yards a carry. The way that our running game has been in the 2 games leading up to Tulane, 4 yards a carry on 14 carries is a big deal. And his longest rush was 14 yards. So it's not a crazy one that drove up the outlier. Obviously saw some concerning throws from Jackson Arnold. He threw an extra touchdown, more than what's listed in his stat line, just to the wrong team. But overall, offense managed to put up over 30 points, which was great. I haven't seen them do that since the Temple game. We watched them against Houston and thought that was going to be the end. But seeing them put up 30 points, that was going into the game what I was going to be looking for, to know we had something of a successful offensive execution in that game. Was, are we able to at least hit the 30 mark? We did. We hit 34. Big game. But yeah, Javante Barnes for me, offensive player of the game. He earned it. Real solid, and I think he's going to be vital today against Tennessee.
I absolutely agree with you. He had a heck of a game, and he's really establishing himself as or I guess I should say he's reestablishing himself. He had a great year in 2022. He was injured most of last year, but now he's having a really good year again. And he's just putting up consistent play. The consistent play factor is why I chose my offensive player of the week, Deion Burks. 7 catches for 80 yards from the first drive to the last. He was just a model of consistency. You throw it his way, he's going to catch it. He's going to get some yards. He was big on third down. He was big on early downs. He was good in contested catches in after the catch situations. He just had a heck of a ball game, and we're going to need him to continue doing that to if we want to hope to have that level of offensive production against Tennessee today. You know, about something last week against Tulane. Brent Venables, he said something in his press conference that I don't disagree with. He was talking about Jackson Arnold, and he said that that pick six, that was the first moment this season that he had to pull Jackson Arnold aside and say, "Hey, you really made a bad decision here. You should have done X, Y, or Z instead." And he started talking about how even on that pick six, he understood what Jackson was trying to do. Dion was open in the middle. He just didn't see the linebacker nearby. He was just trying to get it to Dion right there, and the linebacker's just able to slip right under it. Couple drives later, it's another third and long, and it was a similar look from the defense, only Jackson Arnold changed how he threw it. Instead, he threw his receiver open, and it was a first down. I think he just kind of panicked a little bit in that situation, but honestly, I I like seeing that our quarterback is having to go through all this adversity so early because when it comes down to the big games against the big opponents, he's really learning how to go down and win the game. And Dion Burks, my offensive player of the week, he is going to be a key role in helping Jackson Arnold learn how to win those games like he did against Tulane last week. And just as good as he was on the offense, I'm going to have to give my defensive player of the week. I'm going to have to make that a two-way tie between R. Mason Thomas for obvious reasons and Des Malone. Des Malone, his name wasn't called very much throughout the game, and people might be wondering why I'm picking him for the defensive player of the week with R. Mason Thomas. It's because of the 48 snaps that he played, only 6 of them was he targeted. On those six targets, he broke up 2 passes. He allowed 1 catch, and that 1 catch went for -2 yards. So he had a heck of a game in the secondary, considering he hasn't played that much leading into last week. And then R. Mason Thomas, he kind of pulled a Thanos from Age of Ultron in the post-credit scene when he gets the Infinity Gauntlet and says, "Fine, I'll do it myself." Like R. Mason Thomas, he wanted to go home. He was ready for his snap, and so he put it into that game.
Yep. Yep, he sure did. Complimenting our Mason Thomas was Danny Stutzman, my defensive player of the game. Stutzman is on a tear through these first 3 games of the year. Here against Tulane, he had 12 tackles, 6 solo tackles. The man is a unit. He is on track to have a year that I think will cement him as one of the best, if not the best linebacker at OU in the 2000s, the post 2000 era. Some very deserving and notable candidates in that discussion. You know, Rufus Alexander, Eric Stryker, Curtis Lofton, Kenneth Murray.
Benito.
No. I like Nick Benito as much as the next guy. I don't think he's in that conversation. But no, you look at those guys and see what Stutzman is doing right now and the way that he leads the cohesion of the defense and drives it. It's something to see. He's really on track for a good year this year, knocking things out. Overall, through week 3, I think what we're seeing, across the college football landscape as a whole, is that we're in for some teams who are going to have their expectations violated a little bit as they get into conference play. Looking at Florida State, I think there are a lot of fan bases that look at their team and say, well, when we get into conference play, we might lose one here or there. It's bound to happen. It's hard to go undefeated. It's always been hard to do, but especially now in the NIL era, with some of the upward movement of parity at this point, it's increasingly hard to go undefeated, even in your non-conference games. Look at Notre Dame, right? Northern Illinois now with the number 1 strength of record in college football, and moving on their way to getting that group of 5 playoff berth, depending on how their season goes. What happened? I don't know. We'll see. But looking at Florida State, Florida State did not see themselves losing to Boston College, did not see themselves losing to Memphis. Um, who's the other team they lost to? Who's the third team they lost to?
Georgia Tech, week 1
That's right.
or week 0.
Did not see themselves losing to Georgia Tech. Um, their fan base starting off the season thinks, we might lose a conference game here or there. Before they even get fully into the conference slate, they've lost 3 games already. They're 0-3, and their bowl future is in question. Are they going to get there? Are they going to get to 6 wins? I don't know. Looking at the rest of their schedule, I don't know where they're going to get 6 wins based on the way that they've played to this point. Can it change? Sure. But the rest of that schedule, having to face Miami, having to face SMU,
Clemson.
Yeah, Clemson. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know where the 6 wins come from. But we'll see. And similarly, looking to OU, OU did not see a 16-12 old school Big Ten, Iowa versus Michigan ground and pound game coming against Houston. But we had it. We didn't necessarily see some of the, well, maybe we chose not to see some of the potential offensive line issues coming into the season that are there. Didn't want to believe they were there. Obviously, we had Caden Green leaving the offseason for Missouri. The impact of that loss, we'll see over time if it was a big impact, if it's a, better off elsewhere thing. Who knows? I don't know. But lots of chaos this year, I think. I think we're on track for a 2007 type season. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing right now, and where do you think the season's headed?
Something that we talked about in the offseason was how, at least on the recruiting trail, Kalen DeBoer was picking up right where Nick Saban left off. He was locking up the top talent. He was locking up the top talent around the country, really pulling in some good players. And right now they have a top-rated class, and we were wondering how that would translate to actual games. Yeah, they struggled against USF, but they struggled against USF last year too. I think USF is just Alabama's Kansas State. Uh, but they are a good team. Playing Wisconsin in Camp Randall is no easy task. And they demolished them. They absolutely obliterated them. Jalen Milroe looking even better than he did last year, and he looked pretty good last year. But he's really improving and really becoming a better quarterback. Kansas State, I'm waiting to see, is Kansas State that good or is Arizona that bad? Because Arizona got humiliated by Kansas State, but Kansas State, they looked really good in all 3 phases. They had a great offense, they had a great defense that held Noah Fafita and Tetaroa, I can't remember how to pronounce his first name, McMillan, held them to just one score. It was 31-7. So we know that they're good. We're definitely seeing more parity as Georgia could barely hang on against Kentucky. Uh, some of the usual suspects are still in play, like Notre Dame. They did get their win, and so despite how they looked in week 2, a 66-7 win against Purdue was a much needed bounce back. But I tell you one other thing, this Michigan team, I think they're the worst defending champion since 2020 LSU. They struggled mightily against Arkansas State. Remember, we beat Arkansas State last season 73-0. Michigan beat them 28-18, and they threw 3 interceptions. It was terrible. South Carolina, I feel like they are a really good team. Shane Beamer, I think, is getting them back on track. They really had a down year last year, but he's getting them back on track. They held LSU there for a minute and almost survived against them. Uh, it's it's definitely looking to be an exciting season where there are a lot more good teams. I guess over the next week or two, we'll see if there are really any great teams, but I know without a doubt that there are a lot of really good teams out there right now. And it's more than just 2 or 3 of them, which is always encouraging to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And Much as it pains me to say it right now, Texas, with their roster and the way that they handled business against their schedule so far, um, that they have been the most consistent team to this point. I would argue it's it's a little sad to see, sad to not be able to pick on Texas right now, but my hope is that as we get further into conference play, Texas will drop a game. Um, we'll get some enjoyment out of that. We're in the spot right now where I know the argument for a lot of teams is, well, who have you played? Um, but you can only play your schedule, so we'll see what comes of it.
And
Uh,
just to add on to that, we'll of course we'll see what happens over the next 3 weeks. But remember, last year, Texas beat Alabama by 10 at Bryant-Denny, with Nick Saban as the head coach, and we struggled against SMU that same week. 2 weeks later, we struggled against Cincinnati. We heard all about how elite of a team Texas was and how they were just going to mop the floor with OU, and we saw what happened. But anyways.
well, agreed. In fairness to Texas, though, they ended up in a semifinal, and we ended up losing to Arizona in the Nobody Bowl. So I'd like to be able to have that next level win, that gets us to the point that Texas was last year, gets us into that semifinal. It'd be the first time under Brent Venables, so we'll see if it can happen. I don't know if it's. I think if it's going to be this year, it's going to require near perfection, um, as far as our execution is concerned, and that starts this week. Today against Tennessee. Um, Offensively, I think what we're looking for this week is a functioning offensive line. We've seen that Jackson Arnold has the arm. He has the accuracy when he's got time to be back there. Um, his accuracy under pressure is next to zero this season. It's been terrible. There was a graphic they showed during the Tulane game, and I don't remember the exact numbers on it right now, but his performance under pressure is just terrible this year. Tennessee has a very experienced defensive line, 3 seniors, 1 junior up there, defensive tackle and nose tackle, both well in excess of 300 pounds. Defensive ends are fast, they're big. If the offensive line for OU does not function this week, if it plays like they played against Houston, for example, we saw a little bit of rebound against Tulane, saw some flashes of what they can do with some nice little runs here and there. Jackson Arnold getting some time a few times. But if we have a bad week on the offensive line, Tennessee will live on our backfield, and this will be a multiple possession loss. It's not what I'm hoping for, but ultimately for us, the defense is going to be okay, right? Iamaleava, he's a great quarterback. He's really shined to this point. He's going to get some over on us. It's going to happen. This Tennessee team, I don't think, is one you can shut out. But overall, I think the defense will do well. They'll keep us in it. This game for us is going to be won or lost by our offensive line and by Jackson Arnold's performance because of the offensive line.
I agree with you 100%. Something that really helps us out though in that situation is that we're getting Branson Hickman back. Our center, he is a beast at center. He went out early against against Temple, and he hasn't been able to come back.
We're
But
hoping
just
we
a
get him
few,
back. He's probable in
I
the
think
latest injury report that was released.
from what I've been reading from the beat writers, it would be a shock if he wasn't the starter out there. Then you've got Jake Taylor, who's listed as like I think it was questionable. It wasn't probable; it was right under questionable, but he's listed as a starter on the latest depth chart with an or next to him, of course. But he is also a beast. We had him a little bit last year, and when he was out there last year as a true freshman, if I'm remembering correctly, he was a monster. It's just we had enough good offensive linemen last year to where he didn't really see much play time. Getting him back this week is also good. Add on to that, you've got Andrew Anthony potentially making his return and Nick Anderson almost guaranteed making his return. I mean, Jackson Arnold earlier in the week, he said after, I think it was on Monday's practice, Jackson Arnold said that he's really excited to have Nick back this week. What that tells me is that they're anticipating that Nick Anderson is going to play. And Nick Anderson just adds that extra level. I love our guys. I love our whole team. But our wide receivers, because four of our top five have been hurt, we've had to throw a lot of backups and freshmen out there. And as Brent Venables said, they're playing like freshmen. Uh, they haven't quite mastered how to escape from defensive backs at the collegiate level yet. They haven't quite mastered how to make those really tough contested catches against a team full of D1 athletes. And so they've been struggling, but that's where Dion Burks has been shining. We know that Nick Anderson can ball out. We saw it all year from him last year. We know that he can ball out. And when Jackson Arnold has good players out there, he's great under pressure. Like, remember that touchdown pass he threw against Arizona to Nick Anderson in the Alamo Bowl in his first and his let's see here. It was the game against Tulsa last year. His first drive out there, he was smacked as he threw the ball, laid it in perfectly to Nick Anderson. Then you go to this year, week one, he's obliterated by a Temple defensive lineman, but it lays it perfectly in the bucket for Jalil Farouk. It's just one of those where when we have our guys out there, they know how to get open. Jackson Arnold can find them, but it's just the pressure that our offensive line has allowed, plus the inexperience at wide receiver, has really kept them from thriving. If we can have cohesion with the offensive line this week, a group that is working together, they're communicating well, and they're at least slowing down the Tennessee defense. The Tennessee secondary is their weakest spot. You'll hear even Tennessee people say that their secondary is their weakest spot. If our offensive line can just get us enough time to let Jackson Arnold cook their secondary, we're going to be in that game as long as we want to be. And on top of that, when you look at the other side of the ball, it's also going to be our defensive line. As the offensive line is going to make the difference for us on offense, the defensive line is going to make the biggest difference for us in the game. Tennessee, they love to spread their guys out all the way across the field, and they run a faster offense than OU ran last year. But something that Nick Saban said yesterday on the Pat McAfee show when they were in the stadium was that if Oklahoma can just force negative plays, then they can win that game because Tennessee, if you get a tackle in the backfield, and they have a dominant run game, by the way, if you can get a tackle in the backfield on first down, 2nd and 13 is a lot harder for a hurry up offense than 2nd and 5 is. And so if our defensive line can really go up against that stout Tennessee offensive line, who's missing a starter, by the way, I believe the left tackle, if they can go up against that stout offensive line and just bully them, then our defense, we're not going to shut them out, but we're gonna be in the game for all 4 quarters if our defense can step up.
Yeah, I'm with you on the defensive line. I think, though, the game for our defense will be won or lost by the secondary. You've got Dylan Sampson at running back, averaging about 7, 8 yards a carry right now through 3 games, which, I know their schedule hasn't been a big test, but the numbers they put up, I mean, even against the teams they've played, those are insane numbers to be averaging 7 or 8 yards a carry. Dylan Sampson is going to break past our defensive line at points, and we've got to have our secondary ready and able to make one-on-one tackles in space, be able to stay home, be able to commit to their man, and knock him out. By the same token, Dante Thornton, Tennessee's leading receiver right now, he's going to get open at points, and our secondary is going to have to close up those gaps pretty quick. I'm sure, Zach Alley, I'm sure, is, making some adjustments at this point that Iamaleava probably hasn't seen. And, no team has seen yet. I know in the non-conference weeks, assuming you don't have a big game, a Clemson, Georgia type thing, you tend to keep things pretty simple and not show too much of your hand, especially in OU's case with the schedule we've got this year. It's not to say we were hiding everything. It's not to say we're going to come out there with a brand new playbook, but it's to say there's going to be some looks and some schemes that I don't think Tennessee is going to have on film yet for us. So The secondary, I think, is going to be the big winner for us on defense. I think our secondary ultimately will keep up. If they do that, they keep us in the game, and I think it gives us a shot at victory here in a game where we are a touchdown underdog. My score prediction for this one, I've got to go based on what I've seen. Past behavior is the greatest predictor of future behavior. And past behavior tells me OU's offensive line is not going to keep us in this one. I'm going to say 34-21 Tennessee final score.
Add 3 points to both teams, and you have my final score prediction: 37-24 Tennessee. I think Nico Iamaleava is just playing on another level. I'm really proud of both of us for being able to accurately pronounce his name this whole podcast. Way to go, us. But also that running game, when it comes to that spread out offense, it is so hard to stop the run because you've got to have enough guys out there guarding those receivers. But then with an offensive line as good as Tennessee's, that only leaves 4 or 5 guys for them to block, and that just opens up gaping holes for the running game. I think our defense will keep us in it until about halfway through the third quarter, until the end of the third quarter, at which point I think Tennessee will really begin to pull away. I don't see a way that I'm doing my best to hope, but I don't see a way our offense can keep up.
Yep. Yep. Looking across the rest of the football landscape real quick before we wrap up. USC and Michigan facing off ranked matchup. We've also got the Cowpokes from Stillwater facing off against the Utes of Utah. Couple nice games there. Beyond that, a great Big Ten SEC matchup. LSU versus UCLA. How about that? Going to be interesting this week. Do you have any thoughts on any of those 3 games? Anything that really stands out where you see a clear winner in one or multiple of those games?
It pains me to say it. I hate to say it. I detest to say it, but I think USC is going to beat the brakes off of Michigan. We saw in week 2 how bad Michigan really is. Like, they are just missing so many players. And yes, Texas is a really good team this year, but to just get embarrassed like that, they are no semblance of a good team. They're having trouble figuring out who their starting quarterback is. They just announced the other day that Alex Orji will be starting instead of the kid who's been playing. I don't think Michigan has the team to keep up with USC, especially with how much better USC's defense is looking. Utah, I'm
Hey,
kind of
real
thinking a
quick, before you
similar.
move on, I got to ask, put USC and Texas in a hypothetical playoff game later in the season. Who are you rooting for in that one? Do you root for Lincoln Riley or are you rooting for the Shorthorns?
I root for a giant meteor to come falling from the sky, crash into the stadium. I I don't think I'd be rooting for anyone.
I would have to root for USC in that one. I would let bygones be bygones for the night. My hatred for Texas runs so much deeper than my disdain for Lincoln Riley.
I agree.
Someday,
I
we as a fan base will get over that. I will never get over hatred for Texas.
I think I'd be rooting for negative plays. I don't care who has it on offense. If they get sacked, I'm hooting and hollering. If they throw a pick or fumble the ball, I'm excited. Then the other team takes over. Their kick is blocked. I'm like, yeah, let's go. But on top of that, I think across the schedule, I think Oklahoma State's going to be able to handle Utah. Utah's offense hasn't looked great. Utah is a 1 point favorite, but their offense just hasn't looked great. And don't forget, the former Oklahoma Sooner, General Booty, and UL Monroe go up against Texas tomorrow. They are 44.5 point underdogs. You think they can pull off the upset?
Booty's got him right where he wants him. USC for me, Oklahoma State for me, and Texas is going to cream the booty. Um, gonna be a splattering
Oh,
down in Texas. Um, that does it
Booty's
for
gonna
this
get beat.
edition. That does it for this edition of the Sooner Pocket Podcast. Make sure to go to www.soonerpocket.com. Check out the great pregame and postgame analysis. that's posted each week. Let's look forward to maybe a win against Tennessee. Ultimately, why not us? First year in the SEC, first SEC conference game. It's going to be a good one. Got the eyes of America on us this week. Let's take advantage of it. Everybody stay safe, have fun. Boomer Sooner.
Boomer Sooner.